OU Hillel has not developed as quickly as originally intended. We continue to explore issues of cost, scale, and program. As of now, there is no design work to show. That said, the unresolved conditions of cost, scale, and program can be seen as both prior to and independent of the original questions I began to ask as a designer. Questions about cultural identity and place. So rather than discuss the particularities of a new facility here in Norman, or challenges that I have not yet faced, I would like to delve a bit more into my thoughts on culture and place. Yu Tuan begins his seminal text, Space and Place, with a seemingly effortless differentiation between place and space. He states that place is security, space is freedom. We are attached to the one and long for the other. There is no place like home. When establishing this differentiation, one where home informs the role of place as that construct which offers security, compels attachment, and implicitly provides familiarity, one is obligated to explore the idea of attachment to familiar place and the security that is offered by that familiarity. Tuan implies that the security offered by a particular place is an ontologically informed security when he suggests that space and place are basic components of the lived world. Tuan's lived world is a world of experience, experience being broadly defined as the various modes through which a person knows and constructs a reality. Stated in simple terms, ontological security is a security of being, a sense of confidence and trust that the world is what it appears to be. Carsten Harries further reinforces this ontological relationship with place when he describes the ethical function of architecture as being a means of articulating the way human beings exist in the world, their way of dwelling. This ontologically informed conception of security as a form of knowing, as being, problematizes the defining of who we are for those people with attachments to and familiarity with a particular place. This problematization requires an exploration of what is meant when a particular we seeks to define who we are in relation to any particular place. The question, who are we, is a question of identity, an identity both personal and cultural that moves far beyond one's effortless differentiation above. As Christian Norbert Schultz stated, place is the concrete manifestation of man's dwelling, and his identity depends on his belonging to places. It is this ontological question, who we are, in relation to a particular place, that allows me a means toward understanding what it means to design, to be a designer. This understanding centers on the seemingly inevitable need to maintain and critically engage particular personal, regional, and cultural identities. This seemingly straightforward task of understanding what it means to design has provided the impetus for exploring the incongruency of globalization and its effect on particular identity as raised in relation to Tuan's ontological prioritization of place. This paper explores my particular experiences as they relate to notions of personal, regional, and cultural identity, critical engagement with a particular place, and the globalization of design ideas. This exploration serves to suggest potential design methodologies appropriate to an increasingly global architectural culture and the relation of all culture to place. These methodologies should provide designers with the skills necessary to critically engage their own particular identities as means of generating meaningful places that offer security, compel attachment, and provide familiarity. So, in order to propose and eventually evaluate the methodological skills required to create meaningful places, it is necessary to position my particular experiences and assess their effect on my interpretations and assessments of those same experiences. Further, I am obligated to attempt an understanding of the implication of this in regard to the ontological structure of identity exegetically associated with Cline. Initially, before I can begin to articulate any particular design methodology, I must establish a means of situating and then evaluating my particular experiences. If it is our constructed realities that inform and are informed by who we are, then all of our lived experiences can be conceived of as providing and framing this information. To fully flesh out all of my formative experiences is a task beyond the purview of the question at hand, probably not too awfully interesting. But a brief synopsis of my lived experience will aid in positioning my exploration of globalization and the maintenance of identity, and the relationship of these notions to the roles of designers. At its foundation, my identity, the who I am, that might influence who we are as a designer is tied to experiences afforded me by my family, my education, and my career. So this is a little about me. It's a little weird talking about me, but I think it's important to begin to ask questions about me as a designer so that I can talk to a client about who they are and what their identity means in a particular context. Particularly here at OU, the concept of Jewish is not in my wheelhouse. The concept of student in Oklahoma is not in my wheelhouse, and I'm only beginning to understand what it means to be an Oklahoman and to be in Norman. So I think my background helps to begin to situate those things. I was born into a middle-class family in suburban Southwest Georgia. This is probably an understatement. Rural Southwest Georgia sounds probably more accurate. A family on both sides, one generation removed from farm, so I guess rural is probably the most accurate. I grew up among quilters, seamstresses, gardeners, mechanics, repairmen, and carpenters. My entire family brought the self-sufficiency, can-do attitudes, and moral obligations instilled in them on the farm to careers more suited to their new suburban environments. In most cases, I never knew that there were others, quote-unquote professionals, who might repair the leaking faucet, change the oil in the truck, patch my torn jeans, or even build our house. Those acts, the domestic acts of our particular middle class, were all grounded in family. They were enacted by my parents or some other members of our extended family, or the friends that were seemingly ever present in our lives. My most vivid formative experiences are all related to the idea of domestic self-sufficiency, to the idea that when things needed to be done, we would be the ones to do them. I paid attention, tried to learn from my family, because I was convinced that I would be expected to do all of the things that they could do, and then pass that knowledge down to the next generation. I lived and learned a lifestyle grounded in the authentic experience of working toward actual solutions informed by genuine needs and tangible materials. My early formal education experiences seem to have had no coherent relation to my lived experiences. School was the place where we learned categorical facts, procedural modes of thinking, and the expected forms of civic responsibility. For the most part, school was not grounded in tangible experience and seemed to lack the immediacy of life. I was certainly not provided with the skills necessary to articulate the differences between my experienced life and the emptiness of procedural forms of knowing. My perception that school could never be related to the world of my experiences began to change when I attended university. After years of a simplified and positive system, a university education offered me a place that was secure, compelling, and familiar. I performed rather poorly in subjects that continued to be procedural, like chemistry. However, I began to excel in areas that allowed for individuality, that encouraged the questioning of my identity, and that stimulated engagement with an experiential world. I was challenged in ways that had not been possible in high school. Thus, after a brief stint in engineering and then in the fine arts, I found my way to an architectural education. As an architecture student, I was introduced to the forms and means necessary to unite the disparate structures of education and my lived experience. At Auburn in the mid-1980s, there was a strong and legible form of phenomenological discourse that seamlessly integrated experiential and ontological ways of knowing with equally robust critical engagements with both place and materiality. The confluence of phenomenological discourse and critical engagement sanctioned, for me, an architecture that was theoretically grounded in the immediate and tangible world of considered and constructed place. My particular experiences were encouraged as valid means of expressing my environment. The life I knew, one familiar and secure, shaped placemaking that was qualifiably meaningful. The theoretical stance that architecture can and should be meaningful was most readily informed by Northrop Schultz's assertion that one of the basic needs of people is to experience life situations as meaningful, and that architecture exists as one means of keeping and transmitting this meaning. At the same time that my particular experiences were being validated as meaningful, I was also taught by the faculty and my peers at Auburn to be rigorously critical of those very experiences and my interpretations of them. It was not enough simply to accept things as they appeared. A methodological process of analysis, evaluation, and finally synthesis was crucial to ensuring that architecture did not evolve into sentimentality or deliberate form making. These critical and theoretical approaches to architecture subsequently informed my professional and academic career. After 11 years of practice, predominantly in public housing, entertainment venues, and aviation design, I found that the critical and theoretical approaches to architecture that I had learned as an undergraduate were still not fully informed by a coherently robust theoretical position. Simultaneously, I realized that the things I did know, the tangible realities and experiences of architectural practice, could be passed down to a new generation of designers, a realization that cohered to my childhood notions of how families transmit practical and ethical knowledge from one generation to the next. The convergence of these two realizations led me to graduate studies in philosophy, both to further my interest in ontological and phenomenological discourse, and as a means of obtaining the credentials necessary to be here today. The rigor of philosophical discourse, with an emphasis in architectural phenomenology and ontological forms of knowing, both implied a design methodology consistent with practice and reframed my personal worldviews. Both of these repositionings reinforced a synthetic understanding of lived experience, enlightened by an informed awareness of contemporary critique. By adopting the synthetic worldview, personal issues related to my lived experience significantly altered the course of life events that I had previously envisioned. It was during the completion of my coursework in philosophy that my wife and I decided that our daughter, who was 2 at the time, should be exposed to the myriad realities of the developing world, as opposed to the absolutist mythologies of American wealth, privilege, and access. Our decision to engage the realities of the world, one predicated on a more critical awareness of our life as a family, led me to the Faculty of Architecture at CMEAC University. Thailand is a place we both visited, seemed a model location to engage the tangible world, and to be rigorously aware of that engagement with the world. Thailand for us was the ideal place, a place indifferent to my Western sensibilities and removed from the particularities of my wife's Chinese-Indonesian heritage. Thailand provided no tangible links that might influence our expectations and observations. It was truly foreign to both of us. Conceptually, Thailand became the place that tested our understanding and my understanding of the ways that I might engage and construct my particular world as a designer. My position as a special foreign lecturer tasked with teaching an architectural English seemed to be a straightforward assignment that turned oddly funny in light of my thoughts on globalization. My actual day-to-day interactions with Thai students, interactions both pedagogical and personal, exposed me to the ostensible inconsistencies between globalization and its effect on both cultural and particular identities. While at Chiang Mai, I had the opportunity to interact with faculty and students through participation in both curricular and extracurricular activities. As an integral member of the faculty, and in conjunction with my teaching appointment, I was encouraged to participate in intellectual and cultural life of the Faculty of Architecture and of the city of Chiang Mai. I participated in faculty and committee meetings and assisted in the development of course syllabi, instructional strategies, and design projects conceived to provide students with the skills required of practicing architects. I worked with various faculty members on academic and professional projects that were ancillary to, but interwoven with, my teaching responsibilities. I observed, and to some lesser extent, participated in traditional Buddhist ceremonies related to the dissemination and acquisition of architectural knowledge. I joined faculty and students in cultural celebrations associated with Lana identity. Lana is the northern Thai kingdom. Banquets, dances, processions, parades, and the larger national, regional celebrations of Loi Krathong and Songkran. I also spent countless meals, coffee breaks, evenings, weekends, and holidays with both my students and my colleagues. All of these activities populated with discussions of our different ways of viewing the world. These exchanges served to introduce me to and involve me in the activities of a particular group of people with attachments to and familiarity with a particular place. My straightforward teaching task became anything but straightforward in the second year of the studio. My students were certainly interested in the words, the English words, that might establish a globally informed design vocabulary. However, they were much more interested in the forms represented by the images of Western architecture that bombarded them on a daily basis. These were not images that I brought with me to Thailand. They were the images already there, the images available in the library, on the internet, and especially available in the journals and trade publications of the architectural press. My students' consumption and co-opting of images representing the contemporary Western architectural formal vocabulary can be seen as analogous to the pressures of consumptive market commodities bearing on both our clients and on design practice. The consumption of contemporary architectural form appeared to be the principal means of identity construction for my students. Their projects, littered with the formal vocabulary of design practice, became the imagematic representations of their constructed identities. These co-opted, commodified, and imagematic forms of identity construction appeared to me to be inconsistent. They did not cohere with the formal and material vocabulary present in traditional Thai architecture, with the inescapable climate of Thailand, and with the cultural identity that I had observed. Seemingly, the localization of design practice was bringing with it a significant problem: the dilution of particular identity by a localized formalism. Particular place could no longer be held as particular. And I think these slides begin to talk about the maintenance of particular place. You'll notice that all of these buildings are responding to their particular environments and the particular cultures within which they're built, and to the very contemporary buildings. And I think they have an odd global character, and global in probably the worst sense of the word. They don't talk about the particularities of who and where people are. The impression that place was no longer particular, because students seem to establish identity through uninformed image consumption rather than through the critical engagement of the familiar, was reinforced by additional observations. The vast majority of my students expressed interest in progressive, i.e. Western forms of architectural expression, rather than in the traditional forms prevalent in the architectural artifacts integral to the urban and cultural fabric of Chiang Mai. They were not just co-opting Western forms, but were actively prioritizing it over the traditional forms of Thai architecture. This prioritization of the progressive over the traditional can be perceived of as a manifestation of modernism, where modernism is equated with the abandonment of tradition, history, and particular identity in favor of the promise of progress, an increased reliance on rationality, and a dynamic and evolving social order, not to mention the great Western narrative that disallows any other histories. I think that's one of the main points that ties into this symposium and that Professor Drab's talk right before this. Concomitant to the consumption of contemporary form and the valuation of the progressive, my students prioritized image over content, a prioritization that can be construed as a direct influence of architectural postmodernism. This form of imagematic postmodernism cannot necessarily be seen as a reaction to modernism that resituates architecture as a local and familiar. Rather, it acts to re-adopt traditional forms without the attachment of original, culturally engendered meaning inherent in those forms. Even more paradoxical,